Congressman, thank you for joining us.
Good to be with you.
So much is happening, and you're always nice to join us each month. I've got all my questions, but for you, Congressman, what is most important on your radar right now you'd like to talk about?
Well, I don't think anything is new. I keep talking about the same issue. The bold and broad issue, of course, is liberty, and then I deal so much in foreign policy. We don't talk enough about foreign policy. They are talking about domestic policy and the debt, and that's very good, and that's what the election seems to be about. But according to the polls, they say that nobody cares about these wars, but I have a little trouble believing that because it shouldn't take much of a leap for people to understand that running an empire and spending all this money is very detrimental to our economy. So that's high on my agenda, and of course the economic situation and how they're making it much worse. Hopefully I can get as much interested in trying to allow people to opt out of the system with competing currencies, because I think we're getting much closer to a currency crisis, and if people would only have that option to get out, and it's encouraging news to know that the Indonesians are now looking toward hard money, and maybe we'll put some pressure on Western nations as well.
Because if we went to hard money or a hard money-backed currency, that would take the power away from the central banks to basically build up their power at the expense of the real free market?
Yeah, that's right. I don't think you have to, by force, be able to have the political power to go in and close down the Fed. That's not going to happen soon, but they can self-destruct. What we have to do is educate people to know what the other alternative is and an option to do it. That's why I really fear it when people try to use constitutional money, silver and gold coins. You know, they can end up in prison or harassed to death or fined to death. And yet that is the answer. Why should they fear it? They fear it because they want power, and the special interests have power when they can print the money and control it and make sure the people suffer the consequences of the inflation.
Congressman, looking at foreign policy, you've talked about sanctions on Iran being an act of war under international law and our own law. And now we've got Bolton, the former ambassador from the United States to the UN, saying we've got to hit them by the 21st. That's just 3 days away, or they're going to fuel the reactor. We've got the Gulf states lining up now in support of an attack on Iran. Our government had lied the last 3 years and said we don't have contractors or troops in Pakistan. They now admit that they are there. They're now trying to hype up an increased conflict, not just with Iran, but Pakistan. Can you speak directly to the war clouds that are gathering over Iran and Pakistan?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot in the neocon camp. That's all they agitate for. They think that's the only solution for the mess that actually the West has created. The European as well as the West, including us, have created this mess. And they're determined to, move in that direction. I keep, hoping and praying that they're not successful and they're not about to be so stupid as to bomb Iran, but they're liable to, and that is going to be a major, major catastrophe. And I think the argument is still going on. I don't think the plans have been laid. I doubt if it'll happen the next 3 days or next month, for that matter, but that doesn't mean the issue is going to go away.
Do you agree that we're moving towards a green lighting? Because many of the experts we interview concur that the war drums are intensifying and that the propaganda mechanisms, the very same neocons that promoted fictional WMDs in Iraq in 2002, 2003, are right back at it.
Well, I don't know that answer because I'm not on the inside. I still think there's some disagreements going on, and it's not. If they had been unified on this, Bush would have done it. So obviously, there's two arguments even among the radical neocons and the other ones that are less radical. I think it's still going on, and I think reality sets in too. There has to be some military people who are really worried about this. They, what are they going to fight a war with? What happens? They had these war games where they theoretically bombed Iran, and the consequence was it would be a disaster for us. So there's military people arguing against this as well. So some of the outrageous politicians are arguing go in and bomb. Other people who have a little bit more common sense, economic conditions are such that where are they going to get the troops and where are they going to get the money? And that's all we need right now is more of this. So I think the debate is still going on, and I certainly don't have the answer on exactly when. But I know there's a lot of people there who would like to do it. People like Bolton, they're going to agitate and agitate until they have their way. Hopefully they don't win this fight.
Well, Jeffrey Goldberg of The Atlantic, who pushed some of the key disinfo on Iraqi WMDs, he's back, and they're putting him on television, and he's writing for The New Atlantic. But at the same time, I 3 weeks ago saw the Financial Times of London with top Clinton advisor and also Obama advisor Robert Shapiro saying, quote, if we don't have another Oklahoma City or 9/11 to make Obama look strong, we're going to probably lose the House and the Senate. And then now other neocons are openly writing articles saying, Obama, attack Iran, we'll back you, you'll get political support. So a lot of people I'm talking to and are really concerned that Obama may back an Israeli strike or even a U.S. strike in the short term to have the people rally around him as some type of October surprise.
Well, I guess it's a possibility, but like I said, I don't know the answer to that. I think our job is to point out the great dangers and at least, explain to many of our friends in the conservative movement that, the typical conservatives shouldn't be endorsing illegal, unconstitutional wars of aggression, and that I think that should be our job, and I just can't say that I can either alter the future nor know the future, but I do know what our obligations ought to be.
Looking at the economy, many economists are saying we're really in a depression if you look at the old standards of economic analysis, but that there's a lot of cooking of the books now. Now the mainstream media is saying, okay, it's a double-dip recession. They're talking about the Federal Reserve, putting out trillions of more dollars the taxpayers will have to pay back. Congressman Paul studying the economy and being very accurate in predicting what happened in 2008 and that the stimulus would not work in the last year and a half. What is your economic prognosis for the United States?
Well, I don't talk about double dips because I don't think the economy ever really recovered. Everything that said the economy was recovering were artificial statistics coming from the government that say they give a tremendous tax credit for somebody to refinance their house or buy a house, and then there's a little blip upwards. They spend a couple $1 trillion, and that translates into $100 billion or so of GDP increase. I mean, what does that mean? The cost was 10 times more than the GDP increase. So they talk about a recovery, a weak recovery, and now there's going to be a double dip. I think if we were honest with ourselves, we would say we started slipping nearly 10 years ago in the year 2000 when the NASDAQ bubble collapsed. Good jobs went overseas. We've lost jobs that never came back over that whole decade. Things got much, much worse after the last crisis hit in 2008. And I think it's a continuation of downhill for us. And since they're doing all the same things that they did to put us into this crisis, we can expect this economy to get much worse. The American people are going to be a lot poorer, and they're only going to have the printing press to look to. They're going to keep printing money, and that's going to precipitate the dollar crisis, and that'll be a political crisis. That's when we better have our ducks lined up so that we know you have enough allies to replace the system we have today with a constitutional system, sound money, free markets, private property rights, all the things that we believe in. But that is coming. But once again, you don't know when. Now, we were just talking about the Iranian situation. If next week they go ahead and bomb Iran and the oil prices double or triple, and one of our ships gets sunk, that war would spread rather quickly. That would be a whole new ballgame and may be what would collapse the dollar.
I know you don't like people to talk about how great you are, Congressman, but you really are a true statesman, a medical doctor, someone who's been given honorary degrees for your understanding of economics. And yourself, Judge Andrew Napolitano, and many others in the last 8 months have come on this show repeatedly. And I read the bill as well on air. The financial reform bill allows the SEC to have secrecy, autonomy, cannot be investigated for covering up for Madoff for 10 years. It allows this private board of the Federal Reserve to have more power over the economy in their 97 years of looting as a front group for private banks. And now that's all come true, so I'd like you to speak to that, A. But then, B, you also read the different versions of the health care bill and said this raises taxes, cuts benefits. It does allow the government to come in and set parameters on what type of care people will get. And the Democrats and Republican leadership, they stonewalled on this and said none of that was true. Now, everything you said 6 months ago on this show is admitted. They're coming out and admitting, okay, this doesn't cover pre-existing conditions. It's a tax increase, and the insurance companies wrote it to rip you off as a bailout. Okay, it's true. This gives the Federal Reserve even more power, and more junk bonds are being issued, and record derivatives are being issued. I mean, it's clear they're accelerating all this over the edge of the cliff. So I mean, you've been proven right again. I mean, it's so incredible how criminal this is.
Well, I guess it's better late than never. People are starting to read it and find out. I think the most atrocious statement came from Nancy Pelosi when she says, well, when people were arguing, well, we need to see the bill and study this, she says something like, well, we need to pass the bill so we can read it. And that's, the understatement of the century, because that's exactly what happens. And even as hard as my staff works, every little comma and every little phrase, it is pretty tough to dissect all of that. That's why the whole process is so bad. But I protect myself against ever endorsing that, because it doesn't take long to find out what their goals are and what their intent is, making government bigger, raising more taxes. But even as bad as it is, it's even worse than some people think. Barney Frank is a big regulator. He loves this stuff, and I work with him on some issues, but obviously on this regulatory bill I did not. And he, I believe, was honestly surprised about how much more power was given to the SEC. Because he has a sort of an instinct of more transparency, and he actually wants to do something about that. And he is probably the most informed person about that bill as it was going through. I'm amazed at how much detail he knows, but he can't possibly know every single thing the Fed and the SEC does behind the scenes. It sticks this stuff in at the last minute, and it's just absolutely out of control, and that's why this system will end and has to be replaced by something else.
Again, Congressman Ron Paul joins us. Remember, a month and a half ago, Senator DeMint got up and reported that 94% of the Senate bills are never even read and are literally written by the special interest lobbyists, many of them foreign lobbyists. This is a foreign corporate takeover of our government. If the president can launch wars without Congress declaring it, the private central banks can issue all this fiat currency to their enrichment and our detriment. But he said in his speech he didn't know the number on the House. Do we have any idea of what number of House bills are never even read and are brought out 30 minutes before they're passed?
No, not exactly. The big problem would be that some of those bills float around and you can read them, but when the night before they're due to come to the floor, they go to the Rules Committee, and the Rules Committee has tremendous license to change things. The chairman of the Rules Committee can have a manager's amendment, which was used originally to change some grammatical things and just a few technical changes. But now they use the manager's amendment to replace the whole bill. That's what they did with the Patriot Act. Bob Barr and others tried to protect us to a degree, against the Patriot Act. He worked months on, or at least several weeks on that. But when the manager's amendment came from the Rules Committee, they put the whole new bill into it, which meant that nobody could read it. So it depends on the particular issue. But even if the bill's available, the financial reform bill was available and discussed in a lot of hearings and a lot of talk, but that still doesn't mean that many members would have had a total comprehension and been able to read this bill. It is so massive. So I would say that if you were talking about how often all the members read everything that's being presented, I would think that it's less than 5% where people can say, oh, I've read the whole bill and I fully understand it. That just very rarely